Hello and welcome back to Progressive Coder. So how is everyone doing out there? Today we are going to look at a very interesting topic known as React props. So what are props? Props are basically just JavaScript object and they are used to pass data from parent component to the child component. So if you can consider components as functions, props can be thought of as arguments to those functions. Just like with arguments, the values in the props object can be accessed in the child component or the child function. However, there is one major difference between props and normal arguments. That difference is that props are immutable. In other words, props are read-only. Components can access its props but not modify them. So basically the rule is that all React components must act like pure functions with regards to their props. Let's look at props in our class component and functional component examples. So let's switch over to our demo application, and this time we are going to first look at props in functional components because that is going to look more easy and more intuitive. So to do that, we'll visit our functional component.js file over here, and we are going to use a simple props over here right now. So to use props, we have to first include props argument in the function definition, and my plan is that this message that we are showing over here, instead of putting this message over here, I want this message to be sent by the parent component. So to do that, I will assume that this props object is going to have an attribute known as message, and I can use that attribute like so. So I'll replace this, and instead of the entire message, I'll simply write props.message, and I'll just save this one. So right now, if I go to the browser, I can see that the functional component message has vanished. This is because the props.message is not having any value right now. And to fix that, what we can do is we can go back to the app.js where we are calling this function, and instead of passing it as a blank functional component, we can pass the message property. So let's do that. So I'll declare a variable const functional message, and maybe the variable name is not that great, but it will suit our example, and I'll just put the message over here. Welcome to my first functional component. Like so. And this functional message, I'll be passing that over here. So remember, we are trying to use props.msg in our functional component, and hence that is exactly what we should write over here when we assign this variable. So if I save things now and go back to the browser, I can see that the functional component message is being rendered successfully. So we are seeing welcome to my first functional component, but this time the message is coming from the parent component or the app component rather than being in the functional component itself. So this is the first and the most easiest way of using props in functional components. We could also make things a little neater over here by using what is known as object destructuring. So to do that, I can simply remove props and just write message. And this is basically signifying that I want to extract the message attribute from the props object. And then here, instead of writing the entire props.message, I can simply write it like this. And if I save things now and go back to the browser, same result. Lastly, there is another approach to represent functional components, and we have not discussed that till now. And that is by using arrow functions. So how do we do that? Let's look at that. So here, instead of this function statement, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable, my first functional component, and I'll be using arrow function over here. And inside the arrow function, I'm going to return this particular division. And then basically I can remove this particular function from over here. So now if you see, there is a error over here that MSG is not defined. So we can pull out props using object restructuring like so. And if I save things now and go back to the browser, same result. Welcome to my first functional component. So as you can see, this is also another alternative way of writing functional components, and that is using arrow functions. Arrow functions were introduced as part of ES6, and they can make your code look even more neater. And there is one final touch you can also put over here. Since there is only one statement over here, that is return division, we actually don't need to write a return also. So what we can do is we can simply copy this part, and I can remove the rest of the stuff and just put this over here like this. And if I save things, same result. So this is a very, very neat way or handy way of finishing your code in case there is only one statement that you have to return. In case there were multiple statements or multiple pieces of HTML tags, then it is advisable, or it is the correct way to go for a return statement and then put it in proper parentheses so that things are more clear. But if there is only one small piece of JSX that you want to return, you can also put it like this. So let's now move over to using props in our class component. So I'll close this functional component file, and I will go to the class component file over here. And as we can see, we have a render method over here, and we don't have anything else. We have this message. So to use props in class component, we can directly pull out the this.props object. Let me show you how. So we'll extract the message, again using object restructuring, like so. So this.props is something we assume will be passed to our class component, and we'll pull out the message property and put it in a variable known as MSG, and then I can simply remove this piece of JSX and I can simply write MSG over here, or message. And you know the drill now. So right now if we save things, the message vanished because this is not having any value. So to pass the message, you have to go to again app.js, and here we can have another constant. We can have another constant saying class message, and I'll simply copy the same message, and instead of functional, I'm going to write class. And here I can pass message as class message. And if I save things now and go to the browser, I can see that the message was rendered successfully. So in this case, this message was passed to the class component, and then in our class component, we extracted this message directly from the props object into a message variable or constant, and then we placed it again into the JSX wherever we wanted. So this is how you use props in class components. So the last small thing that I wanted to show you is the point about immutability of the props object. Let's see that in action. So imagine a scenario where I am receiving these props and I want to modify them for some reason. So I know that there is a message attribute over here and I want to change the message. So what I can do is I will try to go over here and set this.props.message is equal to changed message. And I'm going to save things, and I'll go to the browser. And as soon as I go to the browser, the things render, and you can see that I received a big error over here. And the first line itself explains the error. So it's a type error, cannot assign to read-only property message of object. And that object is basically the props object, and message is again a property of that object. So basically what React is trying to tell us that you cannot change the read-only property. So this means that the props object is in fact immutable. And so this is invalid statement over here. So if I remove this and if I save things, it again starts working fine. So this means that you can receive the props object, but you cannot modify that in a component. And this creates an issue if we want to make our components more dynamic. To solve that, we will be looking at something known as state in future videos. So with this, we have successfully completed our React beginner section. We covered a lot of important topics in this section. We looked at what is React and how a React app starts up. We also took a deep dive into JSX, or the React's way of describing the user interface. We also understood the React DOM update process and how React only renders the changes and thereby making things faster. Finally, we looked into React components, both functional and class components, and how we can use props with both of them. If your goal was to simply have a high-level understanding of React, this is enough. However, if you intend to get into serious React development in the coming days, you should definitely continue to the intermediate section, where we'll be covering a lot of important topics related to React. Hope this section was useful to you, and definitely I would look forward to see you in the next part of the course. Don't forget to like and subscribe.